Let's stick with Republicans and these Republican primaries. Tom, 4 days away, New Hampshire. What do you think we're in for?
Well, we're in for a Trump win, and that's good.
This is Nikki Haley's big hope, though.
Well, it's important that she get a big number for Biden's purposes. And what I mean that is Nikki Haley is going to drop away after New Hampshire. Certainly, if she's still in this, she's going to lose badly in South Carolina, her home state, and I think that will finish her off. But the real question is, where does the Haley vote go in the general election? Does it go to Trump? Does it go to Biden? Does it stay home? Does it go to a third-party candidate? The bigger the Haley vote is, I think the bigger the possibility that there is Biden pickup in that number. And that's really important, that these moderate, more independent-oriented voters are thinking in Biden's direction and not Trump's.
Nancy, there are a lot of big donors, especially here in New York, with big aspirations for Nikki Haley. Will this be money wasted?
I don't know. I'm disappointed with her that she can't even give a straight answer about how do you feel about the fact that Trump is in court about a sexual harassment charge. She can't say that. She can't cop to the fact that this nation was kind of born on racism. Can't cop to that.
Which, by the way, isn't saying that all Republicans are racist.
No,
I mean, like,
of course
it's not. But
she
it's fair to say we have some racism in our history.
Racism. Yeah. It's more than just a kink. I mean, right now, Donald Trump is using her given name, Nimrata, as a way of making her an other. You know, that's a lot of what Max was saying. That particular group of voters, they're going to be intimidated by something like that. So I'm disappointed in her. I don't know if that money is going to be wasted or not. I thought she'd be a stronger candidate, but she's been backing away from the easiest things to claim, you know?
Okay, well, people also thought Ron DeSantis was going to be a strong candidate. Ron DeSantis was originally pitching himself as sort of the heir apparent to Trump, right? Trump light. You were going to get Trump policies without the baggage. He barely squeaked out a second-place win in Iowa, despite putting all of his money and all of his effort there. So where does DeSantis go from here?
Well, on top of that, he had a bad week in his home state. He lost a key Florida State House district, which he had won fairly handily, and it flipped to Democratic control in a special election. So Ron DeSantis is losing a lot of ground, not only nationally, and he's washed up here, but back home as well.
$130 million put into a combination of his super PAC and general campaign. They spent all of this money, and he ended 50% at a minimum less popular than he was before they spent any of it.
When they got to know him. He said, let me introduce myself, and then he opened his wallet, and they opened the door, and they said, forget it.
Ron DeSantis was made for politics in the 19th century. Because then when you ran for president, no one ever met you.
You'd never see them, and you wouldn't hear them talk.
And so this guy was made for like the 1880 presidential campaign. But after that, man, it never was going to happen.
I think the creation of Ron DeSantis as this sort of alternative came in large part because people were eager to see whether there was something else besides Donald Trump. There was
Trump policies without the personality.
Correct. Can we still get our ideology pushed without the baggage of someone we have to worry about whether they're going to go to jail? And that's where Ron DeSantis sort of emerged as this anti-woke champion. I've taken on Disney. I'm going to do all of the things that are going to preserve your ideology, that I'm going to cater to the evangelicals. I think I can get that vote.
Right.
But when people got to know him, folks said, this is smoke and mirrors, and we don't want it.
Exactly.
We don't want it.
Exactly. He's an empty vessel. He's not really saying that much. And being anti-Disney in a state where Disney is a major employer, it's just dumb. I'm not a business person. I know that.
I thought he was cooked as a general election candidate as soon as he came out in favor of a 6-week abortion ban.
Oh.
That was, he was doing everything he could to appeal to the right-wing base of the Republican Party, ignored from the outset what it was going to take to be a successful general election candidate, and he couldn't even appeal to the right wing of the Republican Party.
Max, I want you to explain this to us, right? You represented a district that favors Donald Trump. We hear all the time people say, it's like, I wonder, do they remember what the Trump presidency was like, right? When they say, we had it so much better, he's a winner, he's a strong leader. What exactly is it that people are pointing to that they so desperately miss, or how their lives were so much better?
So Trump was a middle finger to this system, right? That when they voted for him, it was a middle finger. And so what happens is every time that he does something that many people, I think the majority of the country, finds utterly abhorrent and even scary, it reinforces to others that's the middle finger. And so it is this self-perpetuating cycle. But the great what if of 2023 is, what does this Republican primary look like in the absence of these court cases against Donald Trump? Because there was a moment where Ron DeSantis was leading Donald Trump in every single
Do you remember he went to visit Palm Beach and they were throwing money at DeSantis, going, yes, Trump without the legal issues.
Right, exactly. And then the case happened, Alvin Bragg case, and then case after case after case. Now, I think we all collectively agree that they are justified, but it turned around Donald Trump's case because, or his campaign, because what it was built into is the politics of grievance. And he is made for that political moment, even though it's not based in fact. He prefers it not to be based.
It doesn't have to be, because he's such a good marketer. And it's something that he has taken control of with this narrative from the very beginning. And unfortunately, to your very point, Max, as these cases have come out, it's only furthered the narrative that he's been putting in front of people. I'm being persecuted. I'm standing here as a martyr in front of you, and they're going to keep coming because this is Biden's DOJ, and they're coming after me.
And if they come after me, they're coming after you.
Right.
That's
and so
the part
it
that
doesn't have to be factual because of his control.
And it's totally unfactual, infactual, whatever the word is, because, and what you said about the middle finger, I think, is so true. So that it fuses, it gets that base that much more excited, and they're anti so many things, anti so much.
Absolutely.
And Trump has managed to package himself in this way that he's one of them. I hate to say them, but like a working class guy, although he was never a working class guy.
Okay, but then Tom.
He is so skillful in how he does it. This week, the airwaves were just filled with the trial in New York, where E. Jean Carroll had already been established that he was a rapist. All that was going on was a question of additional damages. And yet the media couldn't get enough of that story. And Trump was incredibly skillful of turning it into a circus.
Which is why he goes and appears in court every week.
And great performative art, freak showish performative art, but performative art nonetheless. And he blew away Nikki Haley's chance of getting any meaningful airtime just when she needed it most, which was an incredibly skillful use of his performative art.
Okay, but then answer me this. I understand why Donald Trump's base buys into this grievance media and why they fall for this. But another part of the Republican voting body has always been the business community. I was surprised this week when I sort of watched the highlights of Davos, how many CEOs kind of seem to be open to Trump. Last I checked, if you're in a Fortune 500 company, you want predictability, you want consistency from your president. Donald Trump's brand is chaos. The fact that we can hear from the likes of some of the biggest CEOs out there that they're open to him, is that just telling us all they really care about is less regulation and tax cuts?
I think there's a bit of that, but I also think it's a bit of they believe Donald Trump may be our next president. And there was a lot of that.
And they don't want to burn their bridge with him.
And they don't want to burn the bridge. And there was a lot of that circulating at Davos, that if we had to make a bet now, Donald Trump's our next president,
and they don't want to be on his enemy list,
and you
Bob
know
Iger style.
And unleash Donald Trump in a second term. People saw what he was prepared to do to companies in his first term. I think there's fear there that they are being very careful.
That's just a CYA.
The Biden campaign cannot let this false nostalgia go into place here, where we have every day they need to remind people about Lafayette Square, the mishandling of COVID, the way each and every day you woke up. Remember that feeling? You're waking up, what the hell is this guy going to tweet today that's going to divide America? Going all the way back to the Muslim ban. In his first 2 days of his presidency, you had him execute this policy, horribly implemented, horribly racist and xenophobic, that left people at the airport wondering if they could come into the United States of America, place once the beacon of hope. That we have got to remind people over and over and over again, not just how horrible of a human being he is, but how horrible of an executive he was.
I agree, but it seems like there's more of a focus on all the negative things that he does. He sucks the air out of the room. I mean, even in this conversation, we have to talk about him, but he's so much the subject of news headlines and stories that there's no room for the Democratic messaging.
Charles, then I want you to answer two questions for me.
Sure.
In Donald Trump's defamation trial, he let it rip all week. And to Tom's point, the media ate it up. Why isn't the judge there tightening things up the way some, I mean, I just feel like Trump had the microphone and he said whatever the hell he wanted to say, and it seemed like the judge allowed it to happen.
I think that one of the things that Donald Trump does very well, sort of extraordinarily well, with the sort of leeway that judges are giving him, is that he puts a lot of pressure on the refs. And he does that because what he's trying to do essentially is to force them to make a call. Either you're going to shut me up and give me an issue that I can appeal for later, or you're going to let me talk and I'm going to run rampant whenever I can. And that's something that is a sound strategy because in his position, because of his bullhorn and his microphone, he is able to do that. Now, in terms of how different judges are responding to it, different judges have different temperaments in terms of what they feel is over the line and could potentially create an issue for appeal. But really quickly, I want to go back to the point that Max and Nancy just made. I actually disagree with you in terms of what the Biden campaign needs to be doing around messaging with respect to Donald Trump. We tried that in 2016, and it didn't go well, in part, to say, look how bad he is, he's terrible, he's terrible. In terms of the focus now, it is getting, number one, persuadable voters to the polls, and number two, energizing your base. The way you do that is not by talking about how bad he is, but rather how good you are.
We're going to talk about President Biden in a minute. Let me just ask you one more Trump legal question, and I really do say this with respect. Why doesn't he have better lawyers? Right? You're the president of the United States, or former president. I don't mean it in a sassy way. And you are up against the most skilled, well-resourced law firm, essentially, on the other side, which is the DOJ. And he's got a grab bag of lawyers up there. Why is that?
It's a great question. And it really is not something that people should take for granted. There are a lot of lawyers who won't take his case.
Because he doesn't pay his bills?
Well, even if you're getting his PAC that pays his bills, because that's sort of the new
let me tell you,
around.
I saw a podcast this week where his lawyer, Alina Habba, said she'd rather be pretty than smart because you can fake smarts. And I'm not knocking her, but I'm going, yo, DJT, are you kidding me that this is who you picked?
This is not only a matter of you having a limited selection, but also he's not the client who's going to listen to his lawyer.
Or anyone.
He's the client who's going to tell his lawyer, this is our legal strategy. An attorney worth his weight in salt is not going to put his reputation and law license in front of the country, let alone the world, by following a candidate who's also a criminal defendant, because that's what he is at this point. They're one and the same, who's telling you how to do your job and doesn't know.